written our own RFPs. That year I was going to try to take a break and expand and do it. So I ended up knuckling down and doing it and wrote the RFPs. And God blessed us because my name is Dr. Dennis James Woods. I am a author and a book publisher, and also a CEO of a social service agency called Couples Mentoring Youth and Family Services, and pastor of Power of the Holy Ghost Deliverance Ministries located in the Chicago.
Hey, it's Kellen, and today, you guys, I'm going to be honest, this is possibly for Diversified Game. You may see also excerpts or the whole thing on my Kellen Kash YouTube, our Work Break Conversations podcast, possibly, because we are going to be talking about the end times. And don't think that we can't talk about the business and your purpose of the end times, but we just don't know where it's going to go. My guest today is Dr. Dennis James Woods, and he is the author of You Must Know the Times, Answers to 25 Essential Questions on End Time Prophecy. It's not his only book. He can publish your book if you are so worthy, and he has other businesses as well that are very purposeful in helping families, especially in need. So, Dr. Woods, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. It's very good to be on with you and your listening audience, and thanks so much for having me.
Well, thank you. And I just got to say, jump right into it, because we had such a good conversation even prior to just setting this up. And I know you're full of, just information and wisdom. Please, in these times where a lot of folks have given up on going to church because they can't, and then they, out of sight, out of mind, please talk about your latest book and what it's all about.
Well, You Must Know the Times. 25 Essential Questions to End Time Prophecy is a book that was born out of the COVID-19 pandemic, actually. But first of all, I've been studying the study of eschatology. Eschatology is the subject in theology that studies the end time events, apocalyptic events, like the Battle of Armageddon and the coming of the Lord, and all of these earthquakes and pandemics and all that we see. So that's what eschatology means. I've been studying that for over 40 years. I started when I was in the Navy, a young lad back in, I would say about 1975, 1976, when I was on the USS England, and I read my first Hal Lindsey book. But the reason why I decided to write this book is once the pandemic started, there was a lecture that went viral on the internet that said that that the COVID-19 was actually not a virus, but what it was our body's reaction to 5G signals that were being emanated across the networks around the world, and that it really wasn't a virus, that the government was putting it out that way, but what they were going to do was come out with a vaccine to inoculate and give to people, and in that vaccine would be the mark of the beast. It would be a computer chip that would be the mark of the beast. So I started getting a lot of calls from friends, fellow ministers, and a lot of people concerned. They were messaging me this thing, so people were calling me, and I'm going like, number one, that's ridiculous. I said, how can you have the mark of the beast before the beast? I said, the beast actually has to be here in order for the mark of the beast to be issued by him. So what that did is it just proved to me that there was a vast knowledge deficit, even amongst ministers and Christians who you would think would know about this stuff. But what ends up happening is a lot of pastors don't teach on the end times. And so we talk about that in the book. Number one, why is it that we don't teach about it? Now evangelicals in their churches, a lot of them are up on Bible prophecy, but for some reason, it seems to be less prevalent among African-American churches. And I talked to a lot of pastors about it, and they were just saying, man, we just don't teach on it. Folks going through, how I keep my kids off of drugs, and I got a crazy husband, crazy wife. We need other type of things from and rescuing from the Lord in our situation now. What I do when I don't have a job, that type of thing, so but the thing is all these things that are happening around the world, such as what's going on in Israel and the Middle East, all of these play into a larger narrative and scheme that fits under the heading end time prophecy.
Now, could it also be that, because I know coming up in the black church, the Baptist church, there was no reference, and then when I got put on, it was actually at a majority Caucasian and Hispanic church in Texas. I mean, I was a full, grown man, but could it be that doesn't make good for tithes and offerings? Why, certain churches, whether they be white, black, or in between, people don't really want to, give to that. They want to hear an uplifting message, almost like a motivational speech, rather than hear, hey, this time is coming and you need to prepare yourself because you want to go in the first batch, the first group of tribulation. You don't want to be here. So do you think that's what it is in your study, that it doesn't make for good fundraising, is why certain preachers, whether black, white, or in between, don't preach on it?
Well, I think the narrative of end time prophecy, it just doesn't preach well. I had a friend of mine tell me, how do you hoop on the beast rising out of the bottomless pit, right? and how do you hoop on the seven trumpets? He said it's hard to preach, and you're so correct that people want to hear they want to hear the things that's going to make them feel good. They want to hear the things that put them in a mood to saying amen and running around the church and all of that, and which supports the idea of being more open to giving. And I think a lot of times priorities in church, and this is not all churches, there are many balanced churches, and the Bible does talk about tithes and offerings and giving and things like that, and you shouldn't mind giving to an organization that's doing good in the community, things like that. I mean, people give to the Red Cross, people give to the United Way. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Today's pastors have a very educated congregation. And so pastors have to be educated. Pastors need to go to seminary. Pastors have bills to pay and a wife and kids to take care of and things like that. And also churches that are doing a lot in the community have people from the community looking to them to be a support in the community. So therefore, balanced churches, the thing is there are a lot of balanced churches out there that do that. So we're not talking about those. We're talking about, as you were alluding to, a lot of churches, their whole agenda is, the main thing is fundraising and things like that. And sometimes it's not legitimate. And just like you could have bad teachers, bad policemen, bad politicians, you can also have ministers. I mean, there's bad in everything. I mean, you've got counterfeit money, right? If you ended up with a counterfeit $5, and one of your fives was a counterfeit, you wouldn't give up on spending money. The thing is, you get rid of the bad one, you keep on stepping. And so that's how we have to look at the churches. But the thing is you're right. Subjects that are like end times are more melancholy. They're more doom, foreboding, and that type of thing. And so people tend to draw back on it. Plus, I call it the calculus of theological doctrines. It takes a lot of study. It takes a lot of that. But I find, particularly amongst millennials, I mean, that's the biggest that listen to my podcast, Revelation Revolution, are younger people. And I think that there's really ears out there for it. If you was to tell people that the Bible talks about many of the things that we're seeing today, I think that would draw interest, because there's a group of people that are hungry for knowledge, and people deal better with the truth than what people think. A lot of times we say, no, don't tell them that. No, they might not respond right. No, let's not do that for the people. Let the people hear about it, and you'd be surprised. A lot of times folks say, yeah, tell us more.
No, definitely. People want to hear more. And, you cannot preach the end times in one Sunday. I mean, it's a whole series. And, sometimes, I mean, even that can be a challenge for, depending on, the pastors. I personally would think that's easy because you're like, hold on.
Right.
I need to go, in chronological order and then I can take from this and take from that. But I understand that the study of it and that some folks may not even understand that for themselves. They might not have been preached that. As far as the signs of the times in your research, how many signs have we seen thus far?
Okay, well, one of the main signs, and this is probably one of the reasons why evangelicals backed Donald Trump. One of the main signs that we've seen in the last 70 years, and of course that's older than both of us, but even though I'll be 65 this year, 70 years was the rebirth of the nation of Israel. Now, in Luke chapter 21, one of the during that whole narrative called the Mount Olivet Discourse. The Mount Olivet Discourse is basically when Jesus' disciples were at the temple compound in Jerusalem, and the disciples were showing off the buildings to Jesus, and he said, "Isn't this a beautiful temple?" It's kind of like when people come to Chicago, I like to take them downtown and show them the Willis Tower, the Navy Pier, the lakefront. Everybody does that. If you're from Miami, you take them down to New York or LA or wherever you at, and you got tour. You're happy to show off your city, and so they're showing off this everything to Jesus, and then Jesus drops a bomb on him. He said, listen, he said, you see this building right here? Not one stone to be left upon another, but it's all going to be thrown down. And so that kind of like threw ice water on what they were talking about. They said, well, what the Lord didn't tell us, what are the signs of your coming and the signs of the end of the world, or the end of the age? And so Jesus said, let no man deceive you by any means. He said, for nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There should be earthquakes and famines and in diverse places and all of that. He said, then you're going to see a plethora of false Christs, false prophets that are going to rise. And then he said, in Luke chapter 21, he then talks about the times of the Gentiles being fulfilled and Jerusalem being destroyed. So this actually happened in 70 AD when the Roman general Titus came in and actually destroyed Jerusalem. And just like Jesus predicted, not one stone of the temple was left upon another, because when they were burning the temple, a lot of the gold inside of the temple melted, and the soldiers, were trying to get tearing down the huge stones because the gold was running in between the stones. So they was getting at that gold, right? So it literally helped them or encouraged them so not one stone to be left upon another. So that's part of the reason why that was so. So ever since then, Israel had not been back in their land as a nation. Now there's always been some Jews over there and some people trying to settle in Palestine, but that all changed on May 14th, 1948, when Israel came back to be a nation. Now, once that happened and the Palestinians were the place, and Egypt and Jordan and Syria and them, they all came against Israel. And each time there was an incursion to expel them back out of the land, they would always win the wars. And so we ended up having the nation of Israel that we have today. So on May 14th, 2018, Israel became 70 years old. And of course, that's when Jared Kushner, Benjamin Netanyahu, they had the big shebang over there. And then Israel the United States moved its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and declared Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel. Now, of course, the Israelis haven't moved their capital there yet. It's just that the United States moved theirs. And so those of us that are that watch prophecy or evangelicals particularly, who fall under a doctrine called pre-trib, and that's when there's a pre-tribulation rapture, which means the church is called out before all this stuff happens. They were really, really behind all of this because they saw that as a prophetic event being fulfilled. So number one, the nation of Israel being back in the land. And all of this is really in the Bible. And Jesus talked about it. But now some other signs that he also talked about, he said nation would rise against nation. As people may know, the Bible was not written in English. It was written in Aramaic, Koine, Greek, and Hebrew. And so at the time that Jesus was on earth and his disciples were here, the English language did not exist. And so so that means that the Bibles that we read today are all versions or translations. And so in a lot of translations, like the King James Version, it says nation will rise against nation. Well, the Greek word for nation there is ethnos, where we get our English word ethnicity. And so Jesus predicted there would be times where ethnicities would be at ethnicities, and there would be a lot of political and social unrest in our cities. So these cities and countries and tensions between nations, along with things like pestilence, which things like COVID-19 are. So those are just some of the generalized signs, but it's all pointing towards an apocalyptic event where there's actually going to end up with the Battle of Armageddon, war breaking out in the Middle East and all of that. And this is why these signs are so important.
Wow. I mean, that is just a handful of knowledge. Now, with, nations against nations, is there anything that you have studied that shows that possibly that could start our America, because America is a nation full of many nations. I mean, from the business to the personal. Is there anything that shows where America plays in that? Any hints that we can take from any of your research?
Well, actually, I have a book on that. It's called Exalt Thyself as the Eagle. Exalt Thyself as the Eagle, a prophetic call to turn this nation around. I actually wrote this book in 2015, and it's actually taken from the prophecies of Obadiah. Now, geographically, the United States can't be found in the Bible because the United States wasn't around, obviously, at that time. But I think characteristically, you can find aspects of prophecies that can fit the United States totally. And so one of those prophecies is the prophecy of Obadiah, where basically the Bible says, though you exalt yourself as the eagle, and though you set your nest amongst the stars, which is a very interesting phrase in Obadiah, where and it's not a typical Jewish idiom. That phrase is only found one time in the Bible. Exalt, set thy nest amongst the stars. It says, from there will I bring thee down, saith the Lord. And one of the things it talks about in Obadiah, which is the historic context of that, is Obadiah prophesying against the ancient Edomites. But the bottom line is there's characteristics of that ancient nation that can be correlated to the United States. A high habitation of living, a very proudful nation, a people that believe no one can defeat them, a very arrogant presence around the world, the symbol of the eagle, and literally setting a nest amongst the stars. Now, Obadiah didn't know anything about the United States. Of course he didn't. This was written about 3,000 years ago. So of course he didn't know. But the God that inspired him one day would know there would be a nation that's powerful, that has the symbol of the eagle, and literally has a nest in the stars through our space program. So there are some things that are very, very interesting. And in my book, Exalt Thyself as the Eagle, I talk about that. And actually, I predict the decline of America in the world. And this was before Donald Trump was even elected president. And look at our status now around the world. Well, you have a lot of people that said, well, he has made America great again. But just ask some of the global community how people sees America now. So the bottom line is, we're the most powerfulest nation in the world. But yeah, we got 22 million people that have COVID-19. We're the most powerful nation in the world. But yet we're about to hit 400,000 people that's dead from COVID-19, more than anybody in the world. and we're supposed to be the stuff, right? We have more people in prison in the land of the free. We have more people locked up in jail percentage wise than not percentage wise, numerically, even though we're only 3% of the world's population. There's a lot of contradictions that go on. It's a great place to live, places like Miami. I mean, look, I'm looking at your backyard, dude. I'm jealous. I'm about to get on the plane and come down there, right? But the bottom line is while we have a lot superficially, there's a lot of hurting going on in America, and a lot of it is because there's a lot of inequity. There's a lot of injustice. Still a great place to live. I'm not trying to pack up and go nowhere. I was born here. I ain't going nowhere. But the bottom line is we're just being real about it. So there's characteristics that we can find in the Bible. Nothing specific, though.
Okay, awesome. And where can folks find that book? I did not see that on your Amazon list. So where can that book be found?
Well, that's because I promoted my latest book. You know, I'm like a songwriter. You know, it's the latest song I wrote that's the greatest song, right?
Yeah.
But it's called Exalt Thyself as the Eagle, a prophetic call to turn this nation around. It's on Amazon, it's on iTunes, it's on Google. You can get it all over the world. You know, when I release my publishing company, I got worldwide distribution, so you can get it anywhere. You can download it in ebook. Any of my books, you can do that. So Exalt Thyself as the Eagle, a prophetic call to turn this nation around, about America and Bible prophecy by way of inference and correlation.
Now, you know, we had talked off air about, you know, book publishing, and you were giving me some good game. And I just wanted to know, with audiobooks now, you know, especially with the youth coming up, but it seems even, I mean, everybody's on the go, on the run, traveling. You know, everybody says audiobook, and next they'll be saying, make it a movie, because I don't even have time to listen without, you know, visualizing. But do you see your books going into audio? Because a lot of folks aren't going to read. And it's a lot of stuff is being, you know, it's almost like the ancient Egyptians, where the hieroglyphics, like who can read hieroglyphics now? But the wisdom that were in those hieroglyphics. Do you see yourself, you know, venturing off into the audiobooks?
You know, people have asked me about this, and I'm actually looking at it to get it done. It takes a while. You have to find people, you have to find actors to be able to do it, or you can record them yourself, actually. But I'm pretty sure it's a lot of work. There's a lot involved. I know that there are platforms available that'll do it for you, you know, but you have to give them a generous part of your royalties, you know. And as businessmen, you know, we're trying to figure out how to keep a lot of that on our side of the table, right, instead of giving it away. But yeah, they make it easy nowadays. People are on the go, and people have asked me all the time, can they do it? And the reason why it makes sense, look how popular podcasts are. And I believe that you have people, you're probably streaming to a podcast or something right now. There's people listening to you, listening to us as we're conversing about these various subjects, and people are on the move. I mean, it happens so much that excuse me, I had some distractions here in the background. It happens that people are very busy nowadays, and they're on the run. They got the earbuds in the ear, and instead of listening to music content, they're actually enjoying audiobooks and conversations and talk radio and things like that. So yes, audiobooks definitely have a place.
Okay, no, that's great. And, you know, there are so many folks. The Clubhouse app is the new social media rave at the moment, because it's so exclusive and, you know, invite only. And you can be in a room with so many different people, but there are so many different voice actors over there. It's really just finding the right person that can do the job in the timeline that you want it done. So, you know, it is expensive, but there are so many avenues out there and people. But again, as you know, good help is sometimes hard to find. Mm-hmm. You know, who is. So my thing with that, and I want to even go into your other business, because talking about good help, you know, you're doing some real good work in Chicago. Tell the folks what you do with your other business.
Right. Well, our other business is called Couples Mentoring Youth and Family Services. We're a social service agency. It started with my wife and I years ago. We were working for another mentoring service. We didn't have our own kids, so we thought it was a real good idea to start mentoring kids that were in foster care. So I had a friend of mine that had an agency, and I actually started working for him. And my wife and I would go together and pick this little boy up. And we just thought it was the greatest thing in the world, working together as a husband and wife, working together with a child that was in foster care. We would pick him up and take him to Denny's and take him to the movie, just go have some fun. I mean, he loved us, we loved him, and it was a real good thing. And so one day I had to go by myself to pick him up, and he asked me, well, where was Miss Shanti? That's what my wife's first name. And at that point, I realized, because technically I was his mentor. My wife was kind of like the ride along, right? He was actually assigned to me, but my wife would come along all the time. But the boy didn't need it. The young lad didn't know that. And so when I went by myself to pick him up, he said, where was my wife? And at that point, I realized that he had saw us both as his mentor. And then I came up with the idea of couples mentoring. And so that's the name of our agency, Couples Mentoring Youth and Family Services. And we started out with just my wife and I. Then we started hiring people. And then after I wrote the programs and started marketing it to the agencies in Chicago, it like took off. I went from one contract to about 20, 25 contracts, and we was all over the place. And when we started our business, we didn't even have an office yet. People were coming to our home and doing their interviews. My wife said, well, this is nice and cozy. He said, but we can't keep doing that. So we ended up getting an office in Blue Island, Illinois, and then we expanded into Indiana. We eventually expanded into Missouri. We were doing a business in 3 states. And so now basically we're just Illinois and Indiana. And we've got a fairly large contract with the state of Indiana, providing an array of services, mentoring, tutoring, case management, in-home counseling, psychotherapy, case management, parent education, supervised visitation, and all of these type of things to help bring families back together. These are supportive services to help families that have been broken apart to reunify. So we do that. We have a number of employees that help us with that. So it's cool, man. It's really a great thing to be in the process, do something you enjoy, get paid, and have a business that's making it even through the pandemic. We haven't slowed down. As a matter of fact, business has picked up. So that's just a positive to throw out there that not everybody is suffering from COVID, and then our heart goes out to all the business owners like restaurants and that need people to gather. And I know this hard times, but it's just good to know, to give some hope out there that not everything is lost. And so we've been doing good, and that's what we do. And plus, we have a radio broadcast ministry. We did have a nursing home ministry, but we had to stop that when COVID. So we discontinued that last March when the COVID-19 first hit. And so we still do our radio ministry. I've been broadcasting on air for 20 years in Chicago, and we now have a podcast as well. So that with my publishing company and my 3 full-time jobs. No, I'm just kidding. So we enjoy what we do. God has blessed us and keeping us through all of this.
I love to hear that, because, there'll be people say, hey, why don't you slow down? But when you have a purpose, slow down. What do you mean? Keep going and do everything you can do while you have breath. Right. Now, we talked about, even in the, next decade, you may be looking at, selling the business, transfer of ownership. Can you give the people who may be listening right now, what type of business is it? Is this a business that they could do all the way in California or Florida, or do they need to be in your area? And what type of numbers are these contracts? Because someone who looks at RFPs weekly, if not daily, the money, sometimes you're like, wow, okay, we're going to go after that one if it is in our wheelhouse. But a lot of folks get jaded by the money, and they just see the 90,000 for 3 months of work, but don't understand what it's going to take to actually make right and fulfill that contract. So can you kind of talk about that so people can hear the behind the scenes when you do get these contracts, how much time you have to pour in and what you have to do?
Well, the thing is infrastructure. If you have an infrastructure set up, it affords you the ability to run your business remotely. Right now, because of COVID-19, my wife and I, we're running our business primarily remotely. We do have to go in and meet with our staff, on a monthly basis. We still do that. Most of our services are done out in the community. A lot of them, actually have two sites, and I have one in Maryville, Indiana, and one in Highland, Indiana, which are in close proximity to the Chicago areas. Really, Chicago, the way it's situated, the southeast side of Chicago actually borders with Hammond and East Chicago, Indiana. So Chicago's close to Indiana. So, but the thing is it depends on the infrastructure you have set up for any business, whether you can run it remotely or not. The bottom line is, in most small businesses, CEOs and directors of businesses need to have some hands-on with their company. I tell my wife all the time, people need supervisors. The bottom line is people need managers. People inherently do not do what you tell them to do. It's just the rebellious human nature that we have. And if no one's standing over our shoulders, making sure we're doing what we're supposed to do, a lot of times we won't get it done, or we'll find another way to take shortcuts and things like that. Those shortcuts could end up to incidents occurring, which could be detrimental or costly to your business. And so you have to be there's kind of like no way to certain businesses, like a barber shop. There's no way to do a haircut remotely. I mean, there's just certain things. I mean, you're gonna have to do, and it has to be up close and personal. Another thing about social service agencies, a lot of these contracts and RFPs, which have to, like in our case, we have to do them every 2 to 4 years. And so you have to keep your writing skills together. You have to be up on RFPs. You have to be able to read one of these government RFPs, give them what you want, because it's very easy not to get passed over. I mean, excuse me, if you don't do things right, they don't even consider your thing. You could have an expansive thing. You have one expansive RFP with many aspects to it, but if you blow it on one of them, you're out. And so the thing is, in a lot of these contracts are what they call zero-based contracts. They don't come with a guarantee of money. The thing is once you have your contract, like in our business, once you have the contract and offer the services, the next step is getting the case managers of these various agencies to make referrals to you, fulfilling those referrals in a competent manner, and then getting more business. So as you build up and people know you, they start making referrals to you and things like that. And so it can be very, very, very rewarding, and it can be very, very lucrative. The bottom line is, but it takes a lot of work. And so that's what I would say about that.
Okay. And, when you talk about barbershops and being there, I have seen in Washington State, and I know you know about Washington State as well. It's almost like I backtracked everywhere you went. Decades later, I was shifting, and I didn't even know you, but it's like the same path, right? In Washington State, I saw a brother chop it up, create a shop, create another shop. And he has all these shops, and basically he's not even in what I would say the barbershop business. He's in the franchising business, giving his barbers ownership of the shop, like with shares. And he then went back down south because he was like, y'all on the West Coast are crazy. I'm gonna go back down south and reopen all these shops. So he has that franchise model where he's changed it, where I haven't seen many barbers, black barbers in particular. This isn't Vidal Sassoon. This isn't, one of those big chains. This is one man with an idea who did that. So like you said, if you create a system and hire right, it seems like, it could be for you, because mentoring is one of those things that's needed. But you have probably the magic pen, or have hired somebody with that magic pen with those RFPs. Are you and your wife doing that yourself? Or you guys found somebody who can search those and then write them and submit them properly?
It's a funny story, man. On our last contract cycle, there was this lady I knew who used to live in the Northwest Indiana, which is the Hammond, Maryville, Gary area. I'm sure a lot of your listeners at least have heard of Gary, Indiana. But anyway, we were going to call her and let her do our RFPs that were coming out. The state released the RFP in December, like December 4th, 2018, right when we were going into Christmas season. I mean, they could have been considered and at least did it in October or something. Man, they waited till December. So man, I was gonna hire this person to do it, and when I found out what she was gonna charge me to do it, and then it's no guarantee you go get it. My wife said, "Look, honey, you about to write them things yourself." See, I've always written our own RFPs. That year, I was going to try to take a break and expand and do it. So I ended up knuckling down and doing it and wrote the RFPs. And God blessed us because we were able to get every service, and I expanded services. I added about 6 or 7 services. And I wrote the RFPs. They warned all the companies that the state had changed the criteria and the requirements for the RFP, and a lot of agencies ended up not getting their contracts. So what ended up happening is a lot of that business ended up coming over to us, which was a good thing. And so the bottom line is you have to have someone with the skills to be able to read those contracts, read those RFPs, and some of them can be very complex, particularly when you're talking about state and federal level and all of that. And so you have to have the writing skills, or at least have someone that's able to do it. But no matter who you hire, it's still not a guarantee. So it's good if you have have the ability yourself. But if you don't have the ability yourself, definitely you need to have access that knows how to navigate through the complexities of completing a state or federal level RFP.
And where did you learn that? Because you talk about, most people need a supervisor, a manager, but I think that's what a lot of times school does, especially, college. And when people go higher, you're just paying someone to make sure you read a certain amount of books in a certain subject. But, you were a Navy man, and I know that the Navy didn't teach you how to read RFPs. So where did you then learn that and be able to master that skill?
Actually, what ended up happening is actually through the Navy, I did learn a lot. I rose up very quickly in the Navy. I was a naval police officer in my last few years of the Navy. Went to the Justice Department after being part of the United States Immigration and Bureau of Prisons. It was in federal law enforcement. And so I had a diverse background where I ended up with on-hand experience in a lot of areas. And so that's how, because I didn't go to school to be a social worker. Actually, my doctorate is in biblical studies. And so I had a ministerial track. But what ended up happening is God gave me the ability. Some of the things that I had were natural talent, such as writing and the gift of writing. And so, which I was able to actually apply in a technical sense when it came to doing completing these RFPs and these very complex applications. I think the first one I did is I wrote our first 501c3 for an organization that I was with. And I think in doing things like that, you learn how to do things. In my case, it was the 501c3. And I did a couple of those. The first time I did a 501c3, the government wrote me back, and there was a few tweaks I made. The second one I did, it went through on the first time, which is usually unusual when you do a 501c3, particularly for a church. Then when I did the trademarks for our business, instead of hiring an attorney, I did that application by myself. And I think learning how to do things like that. And then when I started my agency, there was a person that wanted me to do their paperwork for their mentoring service. And it was just really interesting how God prepared me to start my own business, because I actually ended up doing all the paperwork for this other guy to start his mentoring service. So when it came time for me to do mine, I just changed the headings on all that stuff. And man, I had all the paperwork already. So you learn by doing, but typically, now that's my story. I can't say that's how it's going to work for everybody. But the bottom line is this: most people have to go to social work school, social work administration, and that type of thing to learn how to do these RFPs. But there's a lot of self-starters like myself that if you just take the time and go through these things, like with 501c3s, the government gives you the instruction on how to do it. You really don't have to hire an attorney or a tax accountant to be able to do it. You actually can do things yourself, but it's taking the time, reading the material and going through it. And then when you submit it, they'll write you back and say, hey, you left this out, or you left this out, you have to resubmit this. And then that's how you learn. But that's basically how I did it.
So that self-starting, that's the key, folks. And I like the shout out you gave to the Navy. I didn't want to say the Navy didn't teach you anything, but learning this RFP stuff there. I mean, even in Harvard, you could go to Harvard, you could go to the Harvard of the South, which is Grambling State University. You guys know, I mean that no one's teaching you that stuff in, even if you go to law school, they're not necessarily teaching you how to be a lawyer. They're teaching you about the law and the practicalities, but not,
exactly.
And so you really have to self-start. And I see a lot of folks struggle with that. So they then go get what they would call a life coach. And some of them are like 20 years old, right? They get a 20-year-old life coach and think life is going to just change. But it's really you sitting down and just doing the work and being stubborn and determined. So that's what I wanted to get at, because I also know the Navy didn't give you, your doctorate. So,
right.
wanted to definitely go down that route. Now, you've mentioned this next subject throughout the whole interview, but I just want to be, straightforward, because I ask every guest that I interview, what is your community give back that you are doing or that you want to do in the future?
Well, number one, being philanthropic and charitable is a very important thing. And so we still actually support individuals. We have helped a lot of families and things. We have given to people. My wife and I have lived a life of giving back. Because one of the most rewarding things, one of the things that Jesus said is better to give than receive. And so it's not so much that it's the warm, fuzzy feeling you get when you give to somebody, but it's also the part that if you're in the position to give, that means you have already. And so that's a better position to be in. It's much better to be on the giving side than the handout side. So the bottom line is and so that's all a part of it. You reap what you sow. And so the bottom line is, if you're just taking in and not giving out, you become like the Dead Sea. That's full of salt. It's over in Israel. They call it the Dead Sea, because if everything flows into it, but nothing flows out of it. And so that's just a concept that people need to have. And as you give, there's a saying in the church, you can't be God given. And that is so true. The bottom line is those of us that have a little bit, we need to give to the community. So that's what we do. Through PhD ministries, we support people, support other not-for-profits and individuals. Sometimes we take people under our wing and actually help them and with things at home. And sometimes that people need clothes or furniture and things like that. And so that's what we do. We do that through our ministry arm, because that's our 501c3 arm. And we enjoy being givers and all of that. And so I think that's a very important part. And it kind of evens out our humanity, when we're not, we don't want to become the proverbial Gordon Gekko that's spouting the greed is good type of thing without being philanthropic and giving back and taking time to give. And as a matter of fact, that's the whole thing of Martin Luther King's birthday now, is to donate your time doing something, giving back, going to the shelters and things like that. And it also helps fortify that if you've been blessed to live good and you've been blessed to have an extra dollar to give, that you should think about that, because these are our brothers and sisters that we're trying to help and encourage. And part of my testimony is, I'm living good now, but actually there was a time time when I was homeless. I lived in 7 different shelters over a period of about 10 years of my life. I've gone through. And so, but now I'm far, far, far on the other side of that. And so I understand it from a very practical situation to know that what it's like to live in a homeless shelter, what it's like to be in a rescue mission. And so, and to get and to have to get in the food line and eat and sleep, amongst other people and things like that, and like that as they do in rescue missions. So God has blessed me and brought me a mighty long way. So that's what inspires my wife and I to be givers and to be supporters of the community whenever we can.
Now, your testimony, we talked about it off air. It's amazing, but I just want to know, what book is that in? Because I don't even want to give it away to the people. I want them to have to read it and say, wow.
Well, that's not in the book. I guess I would call that one what Stevie Wonder called here songs in the key of life, right? But Dennis Woods' version. But the thing is everybody has a story, man. Everybody has something that they're going through. Everybody has some difficulties. And it's in coming out of the difficulties is where we're made. A diamond is a piece of coal put under a whole lot of pressure before it turns into a beautiful gem. Gold, when you dig it out of the ground, is raw. Iron ore don't look like nothing until you melt it down. These are all things that have to go through a process of refinement, and it's in the refinement that's where we find the beauty that's in us. One person said of one great sculptor, he said when he looks at a big piece of granite, he sees the beautiful sculpture inside that rock. His job is to bring it out, with all the chipping and all of that. Now, the piece of granite ain't digging it, because you chipping, you hammering, you knocking. But, in that whole refinement process comes the beauty of it. And that's just how it is, we have to go through things. We have to have struggles. And these struggles is where we learn. Look how many businesses, how many companies have been created out of need, out of struggle, out of people going through. So what I'm saying is that there's somebody that's listening to this, that COVID-19 is going to redefine where you go in life. You're going through right now. You might have somebody sick. You may have someone die, something like that. You may have a business closed down. Your money may be funny and all of that. But what that's going to do is it's going to force you into finding a way to live, finding a way to make it, finding a way to survive. In the social services and psychology field, that's called homeostasis, where you have to maintain the balance, and that's what we have to do. We make adjustments to make it, to get through, and so and human beings can be very resilient. If you look at Abraham Lincoln's story, he lost elections. He wasn't good looking. People talked about him. He had depression when his son died and all of that. He ran for office, lost, had a business, it failed and all of that. But he kept pressing and kept pressing. And next thing you know, he's number 16 president. So the bottom line is through all of that failure, hurt, and pain, often comes the green light that will light up, and the light goes off in the head, and God taps you on the shoulder and said, this is your purpose. Things are not as bad as they seem. I was bringing you through a refinement process. And that's what a lot of people need to be encouraged by. You have to go through your tribulations and go through your vicissitudes in order to find out who you are. But you need problems. Sometimes it ain't nothing like a good problem to make you redefine yourself. And so that's what I would say to your listening audience.
You guys have been blessed by the game. I can't say it any better than that. That's inspiration. That's wisdom. I don't want to give you a game overload. I could talk to Dr. Woods all day. You're going to have to wait for that next interview. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. This is inspirational on various levels. No matter who you are, you can eat something from this and feel like you have had a meal. Dr. Woods, I thank you for coming on.
Yeah, could I show your audience my book?
Of course you can, and we'll make sure we put the links in the description box.
Right. You must know the time. Answers to 25 questions on end time prophecy. This is a subject that everyone needs to know. But it has been a very inspirational, giving a piece of my story. And maybe I should do that biography, and then see if I can get somebody to find me an independent producer. And get out there. Actually, I do have a couple of the books that my publishing company has published. We're looking to do movies on. So that's something that I'm very interested in. As a matter of fact, I have some friends in the music industry and publishing industry. Kurt Farquhar, we all grew up together. Daryl Jones, that plays bass for the Rolling Stones for the last 20 years. Kurt Farquhar, he does music for King of Queens and Cedric the Entertainer's show that's on Channel 2, and many other shows. Mr. Farquhar does the music for that. And I have other friends that have played with Miles Davis. I got a friend over in Europe, and I'm a bass player too and a songwriter. So, we all came up together in Chicago. We were Southside Chicago boys, so the thing is just want to inspire your people, man, that are your listeners, that there's some beauty in you, there's some talent in you that sometimes is untapped. But vicissitudes and trials and tribulations have you go down deep and get that oil out. Oil, sometimes it just don't gush out. Sometimes you got to go down there and get that oil, so, that's all I can say.
Definitely. Y'all be blessed. And